Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Smith and I'm the Divisional Manager for Motorcycles with Mitsui Yamaha. I'd first like to welcome everyone to the first video showing of a road test report versus FZR1000 ZZR1100, and I'd like to congratulate Performance Bike on being the first in this new initiative, which I believe will not only benefit the customers but also the dealer network at large.
Performance Bikes and DD Productions present the UK's first motorcycle road test on video. Kawasaki ZZR1100 versus Yamaha FZR1000. They're the biggest and best the two factories can offer, but their design philosophies are very different. The ZZR is a pure road bike, the FZR was born on a racetrack. So, assuming your Aunt Ethel has just left you £7 grand, what do? Head straight for the Yamaha shop or the local Kawasaki centre? On an open practice day, you enter Cadwell Park's club circuit halfway round the first gear hairpin, into second, then short shift to third and drive hard all the way through Coppice. The front tyre loads up as you roll off and drift left for Charlie's, a bumpy off-camber right-hander. Then gas it into fourth and fifth for Park Straight. Park is a 90-degree right, forcing you to brake from 140 miles an hour and go down 2 gears. Then it's in early to the never-ending crisp curve, drifting out a little by little for the approach to the right-left gooseneck chicane, another good place to lose the front. A brief burst of acceleration down the hill, then slam on the brakes for second gear Mansfield. After that, it's a simple matter of redlining through the gears until you see the hairpin, and by then it's quite a good idea to put the brakes on. So, how did they get on? First, the Yamaha. All FZRs are famous for their stonking handling and love of a good thrashing, and the 1000X Up is no exception. Technically, the suspension and brakes are nothing special, but for that one crucial factor, feedback. You can feel exactly what the tyres are doing or how hard to squeeze a lever when you've messed up your line going into the gooseneck. It's no problem to jump on the X Up straight from the crate and feel confident in a couple of minutes. Perhaps the forks feel a bit soft under maximum braking, but the bike is agile enough to scoot round the clumsier ZZR on the way into corners. The Kawasaki was less happy at the track. For a start, it weighs 43 pounds more than the Yamaha. That's nearly 20 bags of sugar. It's bigger in every direction, taller, wider, longer, so it's not surprising that it puts a strain on its brakes and tyres. It's only obeying the laws of physics. There's a lot more effort required to persuade the ZZR to lean over too, the result of an inch more wheelbase and an extra 7mm of trail. But there's one department where the Kawasaki wins hands down. Watch this. That is serious power. Most laps the ZZR was leaving a 50-yard strip of black rubber out of the hairpin. But what's the bike like on the circuit?
It's hilarious. It's got so much power, you don't even have to ride very well to go fast. Coming out of corners, it'll leave the Yamaha for dead every time. And it'll wheel spin all the way through second gear if you let it.
The bike, considering it's straight out of the crate, and it is designed as a road bike initially, it's very, very good. I mean, all the conditions are there. The bike is perfectly suited to the rider. Low crouch, bars in the right place, it's streamlined, you're perfect. Ready to race.
Would it be any good for proddy racing?
Yes, it would. It's the ultimate tool. As we've seen this year on the tracks, it's mopped up.
No. It's got the right throttle response and it's got loads of power, but it's just too heavy. Kawasaki built it for comfort. It's also not very good at changing direction very fast.
How good are the tyres?
Not too good. With severe abuse like they do get, I mean, after 3 or 4 laps they just lose all traction. The heat dissipation is incredible. It's just no grip whatsoever.
They're pretty good. You can have a footrest on the floor at 100 miles an hour with no problem. But with 125 horsepower, you've always got to be careful. They can break away almost anywhere if you were careless. And you've got to be more careful on this bike than on any other.
How good are the brakes?
The brakes could need a little bit of refinement. Changing of the hoses to the braided steel, perhaps change the brake fluid. It seems it gets very, very spongy. I tend to think it is the brake lines and the fluid.
The brakes are fine to start with, but after a few laps they get hot and the forks start walking like this. You've also got to adjust the handlebar adjuster out to the hardest position.
What are the limits you come up against at Cadwell Park?
Me, myself and I, and the tyres.
Me. I'm sure Wayne Rainey could do a lot better on the same bike.
So it's Yamaha giving the fingers to Kawasaki at the track, beating the more powerful ZZR with its quick steering, confidence-inspiring chassis. You can overdo it though. That little incident did for the right side fairing, the belly pan, a footrest, a front indicator, a mirror pod and the silencer. To be fair, a new indicator was all the bike needed to be roadworthy again, but the total bill is £645. The same damage on the ZZR would cost £429 to put right. Let's face it, nobody buys bikes like this to do the Saturday shopping. So Rupert, what's it like riding these bikes on the road, fast?
It's very, very exciting. Obviously a lot of people are going to think these bikes are way out of order because of their top-end speeds, but they can brake even faster than they accelerate. And they've certainly got the chassis to handle that as well.
So what are the limits you come up against on the road?
Speed limits, policemen, other drivers. With 1000cc engines, you've got to go quite a long way before you can safely use much of the power. But at the same time, it gives you a big margin of safety, and it's a very comforting feeling riding around with an extra 60 horsepower, which you don't have to use all the time.
So that leads us to, are they too fast for the public highway, of course?
If you asked a policeman, he'd probably say yes, but you're asking me, so I'm going to say no. It's perfectly possible to ride these bikes within their limits on the public road, as long as you choose the right place to do so.
Of course, there are more down-to-earth considerations too, like passenger comfort. If you're into sitting on the back of 100-horsepower motorcycles in the first place, there's no contest. The ZZR offers a decent-sized grab rail, footrests which don't bend your legs too much, and a wide seat that stays comfortable for an entire tank full of fuel. As long as your passenger's not too tall, the airstream hitting his helmet isn't too antisocial, even at 100 miles an hour. As for the FZR, oh dear. First you've got to get the seat hump off, then you've got to put it somewhere, probably up your jumper unless you happen to have a support vehicle. This reveals a kind of token seat with footrests that place your passenger's knees nearly as high as his elbows. It's hardly your favourite armchair, and all that extra weight carried so high makes low-speed steering hard for the rider. If you have any consideration for your passenger's comfort, you'll find you can't go very fast on a 2-up X-up. Both bikes can handle traffic jams. With a 1000cc engine, you're never going to have a problem lugging low revs and high gears or pulling away smoothly. They both clunk going into first gear and get hot and bothered after a few minutes of sitting doing nothing. Town is where you really feel the Kawasaki's weight, but that's easier to cope with than the Yamaha's restricted lock, crude clutch and wrist-heavy riding position. If you want better traffic manners than this, you'd better get a moped. For long-distance riding, it's the Kawasaki every time. 300 or 400 miles in a day is a lot less painful on a ZZR. It's happy to cruise at any speed from 50 miles an hour upwards, whereas the Yam needs a good gale force blast over the screen to keep the weight off the rider's wrists. It's a riding position that's much better suited to constant acceleration and braking. If you get stuck on a motorway for any length of time, you tend to notice how hard the seat is. Expect to touch over 40 miles per gallon from the FZR as a long-term average, and 45 from the ZZR. If a police car's following you, you'll get over 60 from either bike. Anyone who says they can take these bikes to the limit on the road is probably lying, but all that spare power and handling has a very reassuring feel. The Kawasaki is obviously a more practical road bike. It's comfortable for two, it's got room for a tank bag, there's plenty of wind protection and more instant overtaking power than most people can imagine. The Yamaha is really a solo bike. The pillion seat is more useful for carrying luggage than people. You've got to rev the motor a bit more than with the ZZR, and the Delta Box chassis does not like going slowly at all. You can use the X-Up as everyday transport, but it's only in its element being taken for a good flogging on a twisty, bumpy road. Bruntingthorpe is basically a 10,000-foot runway in Leicestershire, and for bikes that go from 0 to 100 and back to 0 again inside 10 seconds, you need the space. There are two tests here. First, we measure the acceleration over a quarter mile from a standing start using infrared light beams. Tyre grip, transmission effectiveness, engine flexibility and top end power are what you need to get a fast time. The second test is easy. Fold back the mirrors, tuck in behind the bubble and nail it. Even these bikes stop accelerating eventually. To get an idea of what we were playing with, we took the bikes to a Superflow dyno. Bolt the bike down, attach a shaft to the engine sprocket and take it through the rev range. The ZZR and FZR are restricted to comply with the voluntary 125 brake horsepower limit in the UK. Both Yamaha and Kawasaki claim their bikes are on the limit, but differences in the way the two factories measure horsepower mean that the FZR gives a mere 114 horsepower. Ha. Either that or Yamaha horses are bigger than Kawasaki ones. Doing it like this is great fun, but it's not very quick. You really need to minimise wheel spin and wheelies while getting onto full throttle as soon as possible. After a few runs, the Yamaha's clutch overheated and got more and more grabby. Not nice. Not many owners would treat their bikes this way, but it's nevertheless true that FZR clutches will stand less abuse than most. And here's the proof. The FZR's lighter weight couldn't make up for the ZZR's smoother transmission and tyre squealing power. Fatty is fastest. You can't count this kind of thing as normal tyre wear, but for general road use, both bikes will give between 2,000 and 5,000 miles out of a standard back tyre, with 4,000 and 8,000 for the front. It all depends what you do with the throttle and brakes. To hit top speed, we give the bikes the longest possible run-up. Approach the start of the straight round a very bumpy 70-mile-an-hour loop, then go for it. Meanwhile, at the other end of the runway, there's a radar box. You'll be along in a minute. With an upright rider, in still conditions, the Yamaha did 154 and the slippery Kawasaki an amazing 170. With the rider prone, the figures are FZR 162.5, ZZR173 miles an hour. If that isn't fast enough for you, you can get the Yamaha up to 172 miles an hour just by cutting out the air dams in the inlet rubbers with a Stanley knife. Meanwhile, bolting ZXR750 carb tops on the ZZR will allow the throttle slides to open fully to give a truly excessive 176 miles an hour. What's the point, I hear you ask? We think the most obvious use for speeds like these is to brag about them in the pub. Most people who found themselves travelling this fast on the public roads, including us, would shut the throttle very, very quickly. An interesting feature of a top speed test is that it's almost instantly followed by a brake test. Both bikes can handle an emergency stop from maximum speed, with the Yamaha's more direct feedback giving it the edge. We asked Yamaha's Andrew Smith and Kawasaki's Glyn Fisher to give the company view of their flagship motorcycles. What do they think these bikes are for?
The ZZR1100 can best to be described as the ultimate supersports tourer. It is designed to cover considerable distances at high speed in comfort and safety. That comfort extends to the passenger also, because the bike is quite capable of carrying a passenger at the same sort of comfort as a rider. The bike is evolved from the GPZ900R, first produced in 1984, and subsequently, after that period, with the 1000RX and the ZX10, we have now produced a motorcycle of ultimate quality. That improvement during that period of time has extended mainly to the rider friendliness aspect, but also to performance.
Yes, the FZR1000 is what Yamaha describe as their epitome of motorcycling. It emphasises everything that Yamaha stands for as far as two-wheel motorcycle production. It really is the latest technology, with all the development from the racetrack and other areas of development technology put into a motorcycle that really shows Yamaha's commitment to the motorcycle industry, the pure fun and leisure that somebody can get from having two wheels.
How do they fit into the rest of the range?
It is certainly the number one as far as sports bikes are concerned, and truly informs the customer of Yamaha's commitment to trying to put together a motorcycle that has Yamaha's brand awareness, brand image alongside it, and proves that the machine can be ridden to the ultimate with the rider's performance also in mind.
It's obviously the flagship of the range, as we class. The development, as I've mentioned, came from the 900R in 1984, and subsequently the improvements over the years have developed the machine now to become the ultimate bike in the Kawasaki range.
How do they fit into the UK motorcycle market?
Yamaha FZR1000, as a Yamaha man, I would have to say as number one. We have many rivals in the super sports area, and it's a very competitive market in the UK. But the FZR1000, I think, by pure registrations and customer purchases, it really is the number one. It tells the customer that this is the latest technology, with all the latest performance, with handling, with engine performance, and really it is the number one for sports.
To describe its position in the market is a one which we could put middle of the road to some degree. It matches the superbike performance of any of its competitors in the section, the race replicas, etc., but also it gives more rideability, as we call it. It cuts straight down the middle. It matches performance, but also has all-around riding ability. It has a tractable motor, high-speed performance, but all in all, it is comfortable and can be used in everyday riding.
What's so good about your particular bike?
While Yamaha have been developing motorcycles and making motorcycles for a number of years now, they're heavily involved in the racing scene, and I think the technology that they found from the racetrack has been put forward into this particular machine to the benefit of the road user. They've put all the engine technology, chassis technology into a motorcycle that really does emphasize its number one position within the market.
We go back to the 900, which everybody knows about. The 900 created standards in 1984 that others still seek to achieve. That was an excellent bike there. This is an excellent bike plus 6 years development.
Is it really necessary to have motorcycles that will do 162 miles an hour in the Yamaha's case and 173 miles an hour in the Kawasaki's?
A quote from many in our industry is, of course, that the throttle works both ways. So you can use it to 160 plus miles an hour, but it also works in the other way. Yamaha have put together a complete machine, not just with engine performance in mind. And yes, it has a very high performance top level figure, but it also has all the other attributes that's needed, such as good handling, good brakes, and the customers, I think, now choose not just on top end performance, but on the overall package of a motorcycle. And with the FZR1000 you have the performance both at top end, you have the handling performance, the braking ability, and you have the package that really the customers are looking for. The machine has the engine characteristics not just at top end level, but all the way through the range. So you have very good bottom and mid-range power. It really is the overall package that a super sports customer is looking for.
That is a quote from the press. It's not something that we quote ourselves in our sales pamphlets and literature, etc. Yes, the machine is capable of high speeds, without a doubt. In many cases, people don't use the performance that the machine has on tap. But people, when they buy the bikes, obviously like to know that that performance is there. But having said it has the performance, it also has all the built-in safety features to match that performance. Double disc brakes at front, disc brakes at rear, up-to-date suspension, top chassis, good handling, etc., etc. So ultimately, the bike's makeup matches its total performance with safety. I do feel that in time to come, performance of top speed, etc., will be a little bit old hat. The average man that buys this type of bike will want to know more about its rideability, its tractability, its comfort, etc., rather than its top speed performance.
Despite the mind-bending performance these bikes offer, basic servicing is easily within the grasp of a mechanically competent owner. Both bikes only need a socket set, feeler gauges, torque wrench and a set of vacuum gauges to complement the standard toolkit. For the FZR, a paddock stand at £28.18 from dealers makes oil draining, chain adjustment and tyre changing stacks easier. The FZR needs a major service every 8,000 miles and an interim service every 4,000. These take about 3 and 2 hours respectively. The ZZR's intervals are 6,000 and 3,000 miles. Kawasaki don't quote service times. The standard of preparation on these test bikes is second to none, so let's hear it for Kawasaki's Robert Minskip and Yamaha's Dave Gardner. No problems removing the bodywork to get at the engines, though the Yamaha's fuel tap is a swine to reach. Oil and filter changing is dead simple, as long as you remember not to throw the pressure relief valve washer away. The ZZR has 2 drain bolts. The FZR top end is a bit more awkward to get at than the ZZR. Getting the plugs out is tricky unless you have a factory plug spanner. The ZZR has a lot more room. The Yamaha shim valve adjustment is easiest because you only have to do it once every 28,000 miles. The Kawasaki's shim and sideways sliding adjusters are even simpler to work on, but need checking every 6,000 miles. You mean somebody really does this kind of work? Absolutely no problem cleaning or replacing the air filters, very easy indeed. The Yamaha's coolant needs checking and topping up. To counteract carb icing problems of earlier water-cooled models, the ZZR's carbs have small drillings to allow coolant to circulate near the carb bodies. There's a filter to keep these drillings free, which needs inspecting or changing. The FZR's X-Up system works in a similar way to Yamaha's 2-stroke power valve. At low revs and throttle positions, the butterfly valve restricts the collector box, improving torque. At high revs, the valve opens and allows the engine to breathe more deeply. It's like having an exhaust tuned for low-speed power at low revs and high-speed power at high revs. Adjustment is pretty simple. With no cable slack, the pulley wheel prong should line up with the hole behind it. Carb balancing is the most skilled job on both bikes. Using tiny alterations of the adjusting screws, you balance the carbs in pairs, then match all 4, then reset the idle. Liquid crystal vacuum gauges are optional. As long as the bikes haven't been crashed, basic chassis maintenance is easy. But both mechanics stressed how critical items like steering head bearings, tyres and particularly brakes are. Even a tiny misalignment or imperfection in wheel balance can have a major effect. For the brakes, a check of fluid levels, pad wear and disc damage is the routine. The pads are easy to remove in all cases, and spotting undue wear or scoring of the discs is just a matter of patient observation. The tyres are the most critical chassis component and need diligent inspection. Punctures, deep cuts or embedded objects mean one thing: you're going to have to spend a lot of money on a new tyre. If you want more grip, a wide range of aftermarket fitments are available, but stick to match pairs in recommended sizes. Contrary to what some people think, the tyre manufacturers do know what they're doing. You should check the chain tension at several points and set the slack at the tightest spot you can find. The best thing to clean an O-ring chain with is paraffin, and the best thing to lubricate it with is Cowguard. The ZZR likes a good greasing in the vicinity of the Unitrack linkage. The FZR probably would do too, but doesn't have any grease nipples, so it'll need an occasional strip down instead. Wheel bearings and swing arm bearings should operate smoothly with no play. So should the steering head bearings. Their health is directly proportional to the number of wheelies the rider does. If these bearings are even slightly out of adjustment or damaged, they'll destroy the handling. If you want to service your own bike, the FZR and ZZR present almost exactly the same degree of difficulty. There's nothing in it. So, after a test on road, runway, dyno, track and workshop, which is the best bike? To be blatantly obvious, the Yamaha is the sports bike and the Kawasaki the road bike. And if your requirements stop there, that's all you need to know. But with the best roll-on acceleration yet achieved by a production motorcycle, the ZZR is pretty sporty too. On the road, the stability is limitless, and the main disadvantage, it can't get into corners as quickly as the FZR, would go unnoticed by a lot of people. Like the Yamaha, the Kawasaki's limiting factor is the rider. Both bikes wheelie at a touch of the throttle, both accelerate faster than any car driver can believe, and both will stop faster than most road riders would dare. If all you want is speed and power, either of these babies will blow your mind. Buy the Yamaha if you want raw kicks. Its strongest point is the feel the rider gets from the road. Whatever level of riding ability you're at, you can get straight down to it on the X-Up. As long as you're concentrating, it's rewarding you. Just like a gigantic FZR1000. It's also brilliant in the wet. Buy the Kawasaki if you want something a bit more plush. The ZZR's build quality is a shade better than the Yamaha's. The paint looks thicker, the mirrors are clearer, the nuts and bolts just look nicer. It's outrageously fast, but you don't have to go for it all the time. It'll stay comfortable with a passenger or luggage, or just stuck at low speed. The really nice thing about the ZZR is how much it's got in reserve. Even if you try and frighten yourself, the bike just feels like it's cruising.
think he's this way. And what do you think of the FZR1000, Trevor?
You can right off.